Welcome to Kolme Group's clarizen function in a flash, where each episode we introduce you to a new clarizen function and show you how to use it. I am Kim Messenger, one of the founders of Kolme Group, and I'm a certified PMP, and I've built and run project delivery organizations. And I've been configuring clarizen since 2015. Today with me is Bianca.
Hi, I am Bianca Fazekas. I'm a South African MBA business professional and have run projects within South Africa and the Netherlands. I am an avid researcher and love learning new skills or processes and passing on this knowledge to people, especially within clarizen. I'm currently part of the Kolme Group as project management technical consultant. And today we're going to focus on the IsChanged function.
All right, let's dive right in.
IsChanged. This function is used when you want to take action, when the value of a particular field has changed. This is useful because many times when writing business rules, you want to trigger an action when something changes, like your state change, your budget status changed, or even when you assign program manager. And that is why this is one of the most commonly used functions within clarizen.
That's right, Bianca. This is a really important function. It's really key for good business practices, good configuration practices in a lot of our business rules.
clarizen workflow rules can be set to trigger when an object within a project or a request is changed. And if we don't use the IsChanged to specify the exact nature of the change, for example, like a state change within a request, it will then trigger any change within the object.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why this is very important for changes. So imagine you have a workflow rule and it performs some action every time somebody changes a value on a project. Maybe you want, when the state of the project changes, to notify somebody. If you don't use IsChanged to specifically monitor a change to the status field, then anytime any change is made to that object, it's going to trigger the workflow rule. So you can imagine if the work changes, you change the description, you change any other attribute, it would trigger the workflow rule, which is not very efficient and usually probably not what we're looking for.
Definitely.
All right. So can you talk us a little bit through the syntax?
Well, the syntax is actually quite easy. It's simply the field value would be changing between the parentheses. So for example, you would say IsChanged, open parentheses, $state, close parentheses, detects when a state or status has been changed.
That's pretty easy.
Yes, it is. However, we've got to always remember there's some important things to know when using IsChanged. The first most important aspect is, despite being particularly useful for workflow rules and validation rules, IsChanged is not always available in some contents. It cannot be used in evaluation criteria of custom action or a scheduled workflow rule, which makes sense because custom actions are user-initiated and not based on a status of a field or a scheduled workflow rule, which runs on a schedule.
That's right, because IsChanged monitors for a change in a field. And if it's an action that's triggered not based on the change of a field, but on a user clicking a button, as in a custom action, or based on the schedule, like a scheduled workflow rule, then you don't really care if it's changed. You're using some other mechanism to trigger that rule.
Exactly. Another important aspect also is IsChanged cannot be used in an evaluation criteria of a workflow rule when the runtime selection is when a record is created or when a record is edited and you did not previously meet a rule criteria.
Yeah, that's right. And we go into this in some other of our videos, but there are some, as you mentioned, Bianca, there are some evaluation criteria that it just doesn't, it doesn't make sense, I guess. So if you're using those kinds of criteria runtime, then system won't even let you use IsChanged in the evaluation.
Another important point is this function will not work well to monitor changes in roll-up fields. For example, like a planned budget on a project level, and it does not work for indirect changes, like monitoring the project level due date for changes caused by a scheduled change in child tasks.
This is a really important thing to understand about IsChanged, is that it does not work so well when you were looking at indirect changes, as you say. So for example, if I'm trying to monitor for a change in a field, let's say the due date on a project, it will certainly trigger if if a user goes in and directly makes a change to that field, they click in the field for the due date of the project and they change the date, IsChanged would pick that up. But if I am working on the project and I change a milestone or a subtask beneath that project in it and indirectly forces a change to the project date, then it's not going to detect that as a direct user change because it was changed indirectly through a calculation in the system. So very important detail around IsChanged to be aware of.
With that, let us jump into some examples. I've created 2 examples using the IsChanged functions. The first one is within a workflow rule. The aim here is when you change the state, an email will be triggered to a certain team or profile within this rule. So as you can see, the current request, the state is in draft. But if I go and change it to submitted, an email is triggered to a certain group saying, "Dear IT PMO, please see the new request status changed. Thank you, Bianca."
Great. And this is a very typical use case because very often we'll have customers and they want to see when a particular state is changed or a field is changed and they want to be notified because those are key events in the project lifecycle. And so this is a typical kind of use case. Can you walk us through how you configure it?
Yes, I can. As you can see, I've created a workflow rule on the request object. As normal, you create the name and a description. But what is very important here is that you must always set a runtime. So the runtime is set every time a record is created or edited. And of most importance is also the evaluation criteria. The evaluation criteria only runs when the following conditions are met. So what it actually means here is if the following statement is true, then an email is triggered. So when the state is changed, an email is sent to the IT PMO group, letting them know that the state has changed within the following request.
Right. And this is a very simple example for sake of this demo, but you could get pretty sophisticated and say, if the state is changed to a particular state, then send a different kind of email or perform a different kind of an action. And in this particular rule, without the IsChanged state, if we had taken that rule out and said always run, then anytime you made any change to any part of this request object, it would send this email, which is certainly not what we want.
Definitely not. The users don't want multiple emails.
No, nobody wants more email.
No. Now let me jump into the second example. This is a use case by a validation rule. A validation rule demonstrates a success case, a change of profile, or a failure rule. For example, an error message can pop up. Within this example, I've used the IsStage functionality to pop up a little error message saying that you may not change the state if you are not a member of a profile. As you can see on the demonstration, I'm currently on the admin profile. And within this validation rule, I've stipulated that only admins can change the state. So no error message has popped up at all. But if I do go and look at another profile, which I'm going to show you right now, then you can see that currently, if this user tries and changes the state, a validation error pops up, which says, sorry, you're not allowed to update the state.
Right. And this is also a very common use case because it helps ensure data quality in our system. And there are some fields that we want some users to be able to update and other users not. And so the validation rule using IsChanged is a perfect way to do that. Can you show us how you built the configuration on this one?
Now let's look at the evaluation criteria. What the evaluation criteria does is that if the following statement is true, then an error message pops up. So what it is saying is when the state is changed and the current user is not a member of the profile admin, then an error message pops up saying, sorry, you're not allowed to update the state.
That's pretty good. That's very simple and very useful, very common configuration in clarizen. All right. Do you have any tips for us on using IsChanged, Bianca?
Yes, things to remember as rule of thumb, you should probably be using at least one IsChanged function in the evaluation criteria of any workflow rule with a runtime whenever an object is created or changed.
And on that topic, you can actually use multiple. You can use IsChanged this field, or IsChanged that field, or this field or that field. And that way you can have a business rule that triggers when any number of criteria occur.
And the next tip is, a IsChanged does not trigger on indirect or queue changes, the most notable of which is indirectly when changing dates on a work item's children's tasks. For example, if you push out the due date of a task, that is in turn pushes out a due date of a parent project. The IsChanged functionality would pick up any changes to the task because that change was performed directly by a user, but it would not detect the change to the parent's project's due date because that is queued, an indirect action performed by the system.
Yep. Key advice. And that's an important one to keep in mind if you were wondering why your IsChanged function might not be picking up a change.
Thank you, everybody.
If you have questions on this function or any other function, hit us up on our website at kolmegroup.com. And if you found this video useful and you're ready to take your clarizen skills to the next level, check out a link below this video for Kolme University for clarizen configuration masterclass. With that, have a great day. Thanks, Bianca.
Bye.